Right, so we're into the technical forum theme, and basically this was pushing the boundaries. Now, the idea was, and you'll see more so we can talk about at the end of the conference, but usually 12D model and 12D synergy involved with pushing ahead, going into new areas. We like that. We like being on the bleeding edge. And so we're always trying out new things in that, be it all the different types of data sets we have, which have already been there for full 3D, long before people started talking about the word BIM. Even things like all the attributes we had, string, vertex, segment, model, project. How many other packages have got vertex and segment attributes as well as string? Things like supporting ADAC, which is an Australian standard for getting data in for the councils and things. Working with tunnels. 12D field, and we'll talk a lot about 12D field in the sessions, which has been using tablets out in the field. Now everyone's starting to do that, only 15 years later. And BIM and civil BIM. We actually showed reading and writing IFC data here, I think it was in the 2010 or the 2007 conference. And everyone said, what on earth's that stuff? Who would want to do that? Here we are now, 10 years later, everyone's talking about BIM. So basically we want to continue pushing the boundaries, and that's where we get our information back from you. So that's why we love being able to interact with you as the users, to give us the ideas, because that's what we put in there. So we're always happy to be pushing those boundaries. And similarly with 12D Synergy. They'll be trying to push into all sorts of new areas which you want them to push into. And we'll see a lot of this throughout this next 3 days of how we are pushing the boundaries, but you're also invited to be with us and tell us what we need to do to go into those new areas that no one else is tackling. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about 12D Model 14. I did a What's Coming in 12D Model 14 a couple of months ago. So I'm trying to not use much of that material. I want to sort of put in the new things we've done since then, or sort of bring it together. There are a few things we hold up our sleeve. Maybe they weren't finished when I gave the talk then. So there'll be new things you haven't necessarily seen. So bear with me. Who's actually seen the video, What's Coming in 12D Model 14 on YouTube? Rightio. Well, that's the homework for the rest of you. Go on and have a look at that. Those who don't know about our videos, there's 400 or so up on YouTube with all sorts of things from our webinars to training and so on. So basically, first I'll talk about how people don't understand what is our release cycles fit in with this version 14. So to give an example, version 12 C1A, the C just means it's a release version. We then call them 1A, 1B, 1C and so on. Hopefully we never have a 2. That means we have a database change halfway through a version, which we never try and do that. So we released that just after the conference last year. What happens though, that's when we start on our version 14. What though goes on is we have continual development through this time period. So even though C1A is released, we keep developing. So you'll see a C1B, C1C and so on. Yes, there's bug fixes and things like that in there, but there's also new options. So we don't just stop when we release, we keep working for the next 2 years on that current version. We then have our technical forum, which is this one now. And what will happen is we then will have a technical preview version, which is our final beta. And everybody who's here, who's on maintenance, can then get onto the website and can get the technical forum, technical preview version and start playing around to give us more feedback before we finally release it. There might be things in there that you notice that we're missing or could be done better, but we can still change things around. Then we release it, which will be in October, and that's where it becomes pretty hard. Once we release it then, we can't put anything else into the database. It has to stay that way for the next 2 years. That's why we try and get all the really extra stuff in there right now. So it'll be released in October. That's when we start on 12D Model 15, but basically we'll continue adding things into version 14, again, probably up until the conference in 2020. So it's a continual thing. When you pay your maintenance, that's what you're getting. Continual development and upgrades all along the way. Some of the things which we added into version 12 along the way, ADAC 4.2, it wasn't around when we released. DWG 18, well, that wasn't around when we released, so we added that in. A thing to go from 12D objects into Trimesh, a whole lot of upgrades there to make it as people came back with BIM things. An escape, so if you knew you could escape by hitting the escape key, it tells you in the output window, because no one ever knew when. There's some pavement generators for doing a lot of stuff and building pavements just from the design top surface for a lot of the construction people and even our designers. A whole lot of things with material attributes. That all went in since we released it. Trimesh for head walls in the drainage.4d file. There's a little blue star for favourites and a little positions, as well as a yellow star for favourites. They were sort of added in after we were initially released. The attribute manipulator, a whole lot of extra stuff went in there since we released. The drainage 2D, 30,000 wet cells free of charge. That also went in there once we released it. And writing out attributes to IFCs. Some of the things with IFCs I'll discuss, we are adding all the time as we learn more about BIM. And a few things we brought forward from 14. There was a macro that's deleting and crashing on delete empty models. We've got some hard code in there that will hopefully fix that. We released that so that we can fix up some of those crashes we get. Weights for highlighting. View controls on views. If you haven't seen those things, they are in the later versions of version 12. IFC user-defined property sets. I'll mention those a little bit later, what they are. IFC 2x3 step reader. That's able to read in IFC data. Again, we brought that forward. It was going to be released here, but you've now had it probably for about 6 months. The Australian Rainfall and Runoff 2016. Again, that was brought forward and released in 12 rather than holding it for the conference. So if you're on maintenance, all these things are available before you actually got to 14. 12D view. How many people have run 12D view? Yep, good stuff. This is the thing we kept promising, and it took a long while to do it, and it changed many times, and then it came out just looking like 12D model. It's basically free, so you can view 12D model projects, so anyone can actually do it. It can use your existing dongles and nodes files, so you don't have to do anything, but on any other computer you can register it, and it'll run on that computer. You just have to register it. And I think we've got that working quite okay now, so you should get your registration back within about 5 minutes. So the idea, if someone wants to look 12D model data, they can with the viewer. It opens all the 12D model projects. It will actually now, this one, if you haven't been there for a while, you can create an empty project. Since you can't save things with a 12D view, you just look at things, but it will allow you to open and create an empty project so you can read things into it. Because you can now read 12DA, 12DXML and IFC 2x3 step files into it. So all those things can actually be read into the 12D viewer. So if you've got some of those files, you can read them in. You don't have to have the project set up already. And they're drag and droppable. So if you've got 12D view on your desk and you've got a 12DA file, just drag it and drop it on the 12D viewer. It will create this empty project and then bring up the panel so you can read it in. So you don't have to already have a project if you've got that sort of data to bring in. And we'll probably increase the number of reads in for version 14. So basically, allows other people to look at data and play with it. And there's a number of our functions. You've got your perspective views, your section views, your plan views, so you can section through things. All those sorts of things are available. You just can't save any data or do many calculations. Otherwise, you wouldn't use 12D model. 12D model 13. There is no 12D model 13. It's not that I'm superstitious. There's something wrong with that number. Other packages have come out with a 13 and almost sent them bankrupt. So we just decided to jump over. We weren't superstitious, but we did have a version that we released on Friday the 13th. We had to pull it 2 days later. So ever since then, we've been a little bit worried about the number 13 ourselves. So there was no 13, so don't think that we've somehow screwed you over and didn't send it to you. We just went straight to version 14. So what's in 12D14 that you haven't seen before? Some of this you would have. Just to trick you, I don't like doing this very much, but we've rearranged some of our menus. That's what it does look like now. What we've actually done is edit has disappeared off there, drafting has disappeared off there, and Windows has disappeared off there. It now will look like this for you, and there's a new one there called BIM, because everyone knows BIM is pretty important. Also, we put volumes up there. Volumes has been an interesting one. So surveyors can never find it because it's under design. And if we put it under survey, the designers were going to complain. So it's up there up the top, so there's no demarcation disputes. It's there up the top. And it's a very natural thing for people to run with anyway. So it's up the top there. And there's now one up there called water. So this is where all your water things are. They're no longer hidden down underneath the design side. And so it is the way most people do work and look at things. It almost matches in with our modules. Whilst we're talking about water, whilst we're there, another little trick for you water people is design, drainage and sewer has disappeared and everything's now just the water string. So that's going to get your heads going for a little while, and we're still finding places in the code that we have to fix up. So basically, it's a water menu, and on the top it's got a water string. You walk right in the water string, and then they have been really rearranged. I'm not going to show you the rearrangement there, but it does work out with a much better workflow. So it's these water strings. And another thing to trick you is we no longer talk about pits or maintenance holes or manholes. And I always got into trouble because we had manholes instead of maintenance holes. They're all now called nodes. So it doesn't matter because there's all sorts of other things that are in there that don't fit into that category. And similarly, we don't talk about pipes now, we've got links. So it's links and nodes because things aren't just necessarily pipes. They could be open channels, they could be all sorts of things. So we've really gone to town on you water people and screwed you over good and badly, but you'll get used to it. It's not too bad at all. You can display in, display node HGL, not pit or pipe. So you can display that in 3D. There's an option there, and you can set how you want it to come out. This is the hydraulic grade line, of course, and you can do the link HGL in 3D. So they're all in this new version. Again, for water people, since we're talking about their memory, is we've got what we call extended nodes. Basically, this is a circular pipe, chop it in two and push it out. They're actually in there now, so you can do your extended nodes, which are very, very common, of course. So we've gone from just having circular, then rectangular, now just extended nodes. You also can have risers for nodes. That's the little bit that sticks on the top, that goes up the top, because they're all in there. And so the risers can be either round, rectangular or extended, and they can be offset from the centre of it. So you're starting to model this stuff pretty carefully. Everyone wants this stuff, they sort of forget. You pour drainage or water, people have to put it in there. So there's more and more information you're going to have to enter to get it out the other end for the BIM people. There's a water nodes set out diagram. This is one where it takes your network and it draws it up for set out purposes. So people have been doing that, have been asking for a 12D for a little while. There's also user-defined house controls. We've had about the 5 for the last 24 years, which came from Barwon Water, the A, B, and all that sort of stuff. We've actually added so you can have your own user-defined ones, and there are lots of links and different things on them. So that'll make you happier there, and more settings for them. So Rob will be demonstrating all these sorts of things in the birds of a feather for water. So there has been a lot of extra goodies for the water people. Australian runoff and rainfall and runoff. This is a new thing that came out, which I thought would take ages for people to move on to it, but people are starting to use it. The big warning for you here is where you used to do one run of a water thing, you now do 10 of them. And then you don't exactly average them, you look for the middle, the mean, or the middle value. When you've got 10, there isn't a middle value. So it's all sorts of weird stuff. So basically, that's all in there, that's the new standard. It's not the rational method, it's dynamic. You need the dynamic, so you need dynamic drainage analysis module to do it. A warning for you all, this means it's going to take at least 10 times as long to run, but that's what the Australian standard wants for you. Also, missed something there. If it actually is in version 12, we brought it through earlier for you. If you're on maintenance, you can run that from version 12, C1M and onwards. So basically it gives you a whole lot of these 10 results instead of one, and then we figure out there's a way of getting which one you're going to have. And there's different results for everything, so nothing sort of adds up or whatever. So anyway, it's there for you, and say if you're on maintenance, you get it. With the TUFLOW people, who their runs can take up anything from a day up to 3 or 6 months, they can now use, there's a GPU module to go with it to try and speed it up by a factor of 10. Trimeshes, our little friends, they're introduced in version 11, so they're just a generalisation of a tin, so we can have things that go around and on top of each other, but basically they've crept into everywhere and they're now a fundamental part of 12D model. And virtually anywhere where you're talking about doing things that aren't straight tin, you need a trimesh to represent it. So it's a 3D surface. Any 3D surface can be represented as a trimesh. So they become very, very important to us. And what we've introduced in 12 to go with them is a thing called face snap. What this allows, if you have it turned on, is you can then snap onto the face of a trimesh and get that point. Now, all of you will say, I've used F before for fast snap. Well, we're now going to call that quick snap, and it's going to be Q. So F seemed to go better with face snap than R or some other letter. So you'll get used to it. At the moment it's up there, so it goes point, line, face, and then down the end is Q for quick snap. So we'll start changing our naming. So it means if you're trying to pick something in a perspective view and it's a trimesh, then you'll get, and you click on it, you'll get an XYZ value from that trimesh. So you can just join things up there quite happily. And similarly with those trimeshes, you can turn face snap off, and if you've got point snap on, it'll grab the vertices of trimesh. If you've got line snap turned on, it'll get an edge of the trimesh. So this will allow you to get the vertex, edge, or right onto a face of a trimesh. One thing about this, you know with your normal snaps, you have a little ball around it, so you get things that are nearby. Now, we don't have that for face snap. Basically, where you click is what it grabs. The reason for those balls is that points and lines are infinitesimally small, so you can never get right on them. So you need to have this little ball so you gravitate to what's nearby. But with a face, you click there, you know where it is, end of story. So you'll enjoy that one, I'm certain. And basically, we've added a lot more stuff for trimeshes to go with our BIM. A lot of the fences that we've got, you can create them as trimeshes as well as extrusions. Traffic lights, whole lot of stuff like that. Peter Taten's been having a great time putting there that now come out as trimeshes. I don't know if they go from red to green or that as yet. I'm not certain on that one. Boring machines. This is one that Paul did, bringing data from a tunnel boring machine in WA. And the rings are the different way they're doing it. So that's all come so they can represent the tunnel being actually built and constructed, again with trimeshes. Things for defining all sorts of pits and things, and Paul will be talking about this in the design in the surveyor's room. Whole again, trimeshes for culvert banks and so on. So the trimeshes are grabbed into everything. There's another one here that no one probably has seen as yet or even thought about. In the MTF, we can produce a tunnel. And what we've added for 14 is you can actually do the yellow part, so it's the inside wall and the outer wall comes out as one trimesh. And being an MTF, of course, all these strings can be independently, the insides and the outsides, independently controlled. So basically you can now pump out a tunnel with both walls there as one big trimesh. There are commands, of course, they can go either vertical or perpendicular to a superalignment, because when you're doing tunnel work, you want to go often perpendicular, not vertical, which you do for the most of the rest of the work. So then the other thing we've introduced is things called invisible faces. What in hell is an invisible face for? Well, if you've got this beast here, this one's okay, it might have a closed edge, but what about this one here? You want to be able to see into it. But then how do you get a volume? If you don't have an end cap, we can't work out a volume. So you can put invisible faces there so we can still calculate a volume. Also, another way, you might have side passages going off. You want to see into your side passage, but you still want to be able to get a volume of something. So we've introduced these invisible faces to allow that to happen. So basically, there's a whole lot of stuff even there for tunnel work using these trimeshes. In this example here, there's things in there to create bridges as trimeshes. In fact, everything you see there has been created with inside 12D model. So basically the bridge, the light poles, the guardrails, everything there, it's totally, nothing's come from anywhere else, all done in 12D because we've now had the trimeshes for the last 5 years. Things you can do with trimeshes, you can flip the faces. You often get trimeshes, I don't really know this because of what goes wrong, and something looks dark. Just they've got the normal wrong, so you can flip them and so they then start looking okay. So tools there to do that, and you can do it to a whole lot of things rather than before just one face. Create normals. Little drawing there, the normals again to see which way it's facing, because that tells you if it's going to like light or dark. Boolean operations, what are these? Union, intersection, subtraction. I want the intersection of two trimeshes. I want to be able to, the union of them, or take one from the other. That's what we call Boolean options. Probably easy to see is what I call the cookie cutter. Cookie cutter by polygon. Here's your trimeshes, there's your little polygon. There's your building, I'm going to cookie cut through that whole thing. So that's that building in plan and in perspective. And what you get out of it is basically, there's your whole thing cookie cutter down the middle. I've drawn these lines in here. That's not part of the cooking cutter. That's just to show you how it was chopping through it. So that's a Boolean operation, cookie cutting as such. There's a few more things for you. Some of these, because I can never work out how to do some things. There's a colour texture mapping in the perspective view. So basically there you get it. I always get this. What's that friggin' green stuff up on the top? It's got texture mapping on it by colour. I'd like to turn it off. So that's what this is for. You go in there, turn it off, and basically then you get rid of all your texture mapping for Trimeshes. So that's better. I know what's going on. Another one is you can turn on and off, have a Trimesh wireframe. Same sort of thing. You've got a Trimesh there with solids. Go in, turn this one on, and you see the wireframe. Sometimes it's great to have the wireframe when you're trying to pick things and stuff like that, or to draw from point to point. The next one, and this one's totally for me because I can never get this to work. I don't know if you know what drawing density is. This is where you get those red blobs. This is so it draws much faster and things when you've got big data sets. I can never figure out how to set them and to turn them off. So they're great things. If you've got the Bigfoot, they're only in the Bigfoot version, but they're really handy, but I can never turn them off. So there's now various ways to do it. You can say I want to have them globally or by view, or just not have them on the view at all. But that was still too difficult for me, so they've now got a tick on there with 3 choices. So you go in there and say, I want to say turn them off. So if you do that, bang, those red blobs are gone. So that's set for every view. And these are remembered for the views. So that's the one I had the most trouble with. I can never get rid of my red blobs. In this case, we've still got the texture mapping turned on, the fans on the top, but they're all independent. For perspective views, shade is now turned on by default. Again, I could never remember to go and put it on, so it's there. Why wouldn't you have it on by default? Joystick. You used to notice if you're doing something, you used to go and get about there and go. That's because I thought everyone didn't want to go over the top of the world, but you can now. So basically you can rotate the thing in any dimension and make yourself seasick, go to it. The middle mouse button was another one. People using the middle mouse button to go into a perspective view, and that would stop. That's because we're moving the eye towards the target. We get to a stage and you can't go any further. It now goes what we call travel mode, so it'll start going through the object. Because most of the time you want to keep your target where it is and you're moving your eye in. Well, then we start moving both of them. So that again will be another problem that people have had. And it's an option called move over tin. This is a neat, I was calling it the Jesus option for a while for walking on water, because the idea was you've got your tin, you've got your eye on target, and as you use your buttons to go around, it just keeps you that height above the terrain or above your road or whatever of the tin. So it's really good for charging over terrain and things, so you don't have to worry about the height, it just goes up and down for you. There's also a Trimesh Editor. Since we're into Trimeshes, I know I can't still work out what those symbols are. At the moment you won't get those symbols in your version, but there'll be 2 versions, the one with the tried and true icons that I know and love, and then there'll be these newfangled ones which all our new people love. So I don't know, obviously it's agenda. If you don't like those, you must be old. So in there's a vertex. You can add a vertex, delete, move, make it invisible. Obviously if it's invisible, lots of things around are going to be invisible. You can give a vertex a name or a colour. You go in there with edges, the same idea. Add, delete, move, make invisible. Give them names and colours. Very important, edges having names and colours, and I'll come back to that in a second. And similarly with faces. So you can actually go in there, have an edge, add a point to the edge, then maybe pull it out and things like that. Pull a whole face out, stuff like that. Trimeshes do have colours and names, and they have them on their edges. Why is this important? Well, when our poor surveyors get data, they just get a friggin' whole lot of Trimeshes, and how am I supposed to set it out? The real world hasn't worked out that we still like strings to set out lots of things, so that anything makes sense. So what we do with our Trimeshes is that when we create them in the MTF, we give a string name, say, to all the edges and the string colour. So a surveyor can just pick that edge and then follow along just as though he had the string there. Now that's all very good, because we're forward thinking, we're pushing the boundaries, but I don't know of any other package that has that. So you don't get all this crap data from people where they just give you these Trimeshes, nothing else. So if you basically ask them for the strings, There's an option in there, so if you've got the strings to match the trimeshes, it'll then take all the strings and name all the edges of all your trimeshes for you and colour them. So then the surveyor can just take that out in the field and doesn't need the strings as well. Another little thing that's changed for you is a thing called project settings. Basically, these are all the things we had which were hidden under things like defaults and this default and that default. So there's a whole heap of them we've replaced. There's one thing now called project settings, and a whole lot we didn't have before. So it hides on, it doesn't hide, it's right on that projects menu. When you click on it, it brings up this thing for you. And we can actually have what we call name profiles. So you can have a whole list of those settings, you can give a name to them. So you might have a number of them. So you can pick up the one. So during a project, you might have ones you've set all these things up for water or for surveying. You can change them at any time. You can also then duplicate them, rename and stuff to make up new ones. So they're there for you. And what these things are, it's the things that we save with the project. So they're not like environment variables where they tend to, you start every new project, they go, these ones we save away and we keep them with the project, just like that what defaults were. One on is in there, you can turn your Super Inquire on and off, whether you want to look like that new Inquire or the old one, that's in there. And you can set the super style there. So those things, at the moment you lose it every time you leave a project, they can be saved individually for each project. There's a copy Inquire information to clipboard. If that's turned on, every time you do a string Inquire or something like that, it copies the information into a clipboard so you can then paste it into a text file. So everyone has been copying information off these things. It's all there. You can paste it into a text file if you wish. There's an auto-save layout. What on earth's this? Basically now, if you've got all your panels and menus on the screen and you've got this turned on, when you save it away, it'll try and save as many of those as it can that we can do with SLXs. So when you reopen the project, all those will be back there again. So if you leave and come back in, obviously editors and things like that we can't do it with, but lots of other things we can. So that's what we call about auto-save layout. You would have noticed when you've got that new select and things on things that we use the same thing for selecting that new typed and all that. It was the same on your add and minus, on your views, the same for model pop-ups and such. We've actually got them so they're all now separate. So you can set these ways you want those things to work differently for all those sorts of things. I'll jump over those fairly quickly because when you get it, you'll see what's going on, what you need. We've now got a combined 12DA, 12DXML readers and writers, so you don't have to go to two different ones. And actually they hide on the File I/O menu right at the top, so you don't have to walk right to get to them. So basically you've got a pop-up which tells you, and you can pick, you want to writing a 12DA, 12DAZ, 12DXML or 12DXMLZ. When you're reading them in, it just looks for all of them, so you can read them all in and don't have to go to different options. So our 12D is now our top class citizen. It's right there up the front on the file box for you. This one, you'll never figure out what I'm talking about, but I'll say it anyway. We have a new tick on there called Write Hexadecimal Floating Point Format. What we've discovered is if you don't write out data to 18 decimal places, you mightn't get back the same data for a real number. Even when you write it out to 18 decimal places, it still might come back correctly. So what we hunted around, and there's an international format that's been around for 20 or 30 years called the floating point, hexadecimal floating point format. And it writes out in a form that you can sort of read your real numbers. And so when you read them in, you'll get exactly what you have. There's nothing about decimal places, so it just takes the whole 64 bits. So there's a tick on our file I/O. The numbers look a bit strange. Here's 10 is 0x1.4 p plus 3. But you could actually put that in a machine and decode it. The good thing is, though, everything else in your text file is totally readable. So it means you've got a text file format which also totally preserves all the real numbers. And this is the thing I think people should be using if they're going to use text files for sending data around. It's better than binary because you can still read everything. It's also good that your surveyors, people are going to have trouble interfering with that and changing values, aren't they? So from that point of view, it can be done. It's quite good. So look, I think it'll come in most places, but if you really want to keep your data so you don't get round-off errors, you just tick that on and it looks after it for you. All these file IOs that have an anonymous function. There is a tick on each of the file IOs to say do it or not. There's not just one for all of them. It's not all is one. You can read KML files. You can read InVism files. There's a whole lot of stuff for the attribute manipulator. We just keep putting that in all the time. Oops, 1 second, I've just lost my... Right, there's GDA. This is a new standard. I'll talk about this tomorrow, about what it all means. Basically, the Earth is, well, we're moving on the continent, so we've got to have a whole lot of coordinate systems. We can use that in version 14, and you'll be able to do both the methods, and I'll talk about that tomorrow for you. Plots, stuff with cross-sections, uprights, cross-sections, fixed datums for cross-sections, which you've asked about. Long section plotting, allow gaps in these things where your leaders labels, the leaders go up to the top. All those sorts of things are in there. There's a thing for deleting your PPFs, because before they were hidden away there and you couldn't get at them. You can do it now from inside the panel itself. There's a whole lot of extra title block variables, one of them being the calculated number of pages. So it'll actually can work out in advance how many pages there are in a long section or a cross section plot, so you then can have in there one of total number of pages. There's a whole lot of username, model attributes, string attributes, whole lot of attributes in there, multiple time formats. You're going to have lots of time formats. And even in this area here, where you put your variables, you can even put the dollar ones in there as well. So you don't have to go in the file and do them. So it's much more powerful. There's a new perspective PPF. This allows you to do perspective plots into a thing with title blocks and everything else. So it does the image of what's in a perspective view, or you can also put out a 3D PDF. So in that case, you do the 3D, it's got to go to PDF in that case, but you'll have the PDF that you can then put in it. There's also a, so there's a perspective PDF where you can rotate it around and do it. And you can have both of those on the same plot. There's a section plot. This actually plots the section view. We've got cross sections, long sections. This does what's on the section view, so it's never been there before. So again, you can just plot out something like that, again, through a PPF, so you can have all your settings. There's a new nodes diagram. This is for the water people. I mentioned it briefly before. Again, it's in a PPF, so you've got all your things like margins and title blocks, and then you can put out these diagrams. So they're all extra things in plotting. Big one, and this will be demonstrated tomorrow, is the Multipage PlotS. So it's a MPS, the iPhone V12 on steroids. So it no longer is it multi-page, whatever it was, page sheets. It stands for multi-page plots. We're no longer using the word sheets. And so basically, it's got 3 levels, book, chapter, and page. So that'll be explained to you. And you've got all the things we had before, but a lot more stuff. And I say this will be demonstrated because you've got symbols, models, special chapters. What are these special chapters? There where you can have a whole chapter of cross sections or long sections, and they'll all be stuck in there, and it'll work out how many there are to know how many pages you need. You can have things like you can have a title block for just a chapter, so everything in that chapter gets it, and you can turn it off for one page in the chapter, all that sort of stuff. The order of the way you have it in there determines the plotting order. So you can have things like draft only, watermark, and they'll come in order. You can put it at the book level, and so it'll just go on top of every plot. It'll say draft version, stuff like that. Anyway, they'll be demonstrated for you tomorrow. And so say these are the special chapters of cross sections, long sections, drainage, PPFs. There's also plot frames there, and also nodes diagram. So it'll work out how many pages there, and just that chapter will be self-contained. So your page number can then be continuous right to the end. So if you've got all those mixed in, there's no problem. Right. Super Inquire, we've kept adding more things in there for you, and of course Space Snap's in there, and there's a whole lot more in there too about dates of elements and stuff like that. A whole lot of extra stuff going into chains. I'll just mention that there's heaps, and when you come back to things you want in chains, let us know and we try and add them in. 12D field, basically we're combined, set out and pick up. It's mainly pick up that's had the big change, so they'll be going through to the birds of a feather after morning tea. That's a pretty important one. It's a huge change to make it all integrated. So they'll be talked about in the surveillance section. BIM, my old favourite. There's great debates about what BIM is. Is it a process? Is it a solid? Is it whatever? For all of us here, that's the gods talking. We just have to produce objects of some sort. That's what we're all being told. We want a BIM model. They're not talking about processes, they just want friggin' data out of us. We're learning more about this every day, so we want your help always. ADAC in Queensland, that's a BIM. If you're doing that, it's a BIM system. We're doing that. Trimeshes, like you all go out to BIM. The IFC, that is the international standard for open BIM. We support the IFC reading and writing. So that's there for everyone in version 12. And we'll be increasing that for version 14 where there's extra IFC formats. These are some examples from other products we've read in from ArchiCAD and other products. There's a thing they could use to find property sets. That's in BIM language, or IFC language, as attributes. So you're able to say in 12D which of your attributes go out to BIM. You don't have to send all of them. And you can then read that into, say, Celebri, and all your attributes will turn up because they're name sets. All that can be done. BIM has a thing called a global UID. This is a thing that there's a worldwide standard. You can pick right here a position, space and time that's unique. They use it all the time in there because they don't have things like string names. So you don't call something a string name, you give it a 16-letter thing that's AXPQ. That's called a global ID. We can write them out, create them when they're written out, and we can read them back in, so we can maintain these. This is a problem. We didn't bother about maintaining more before. Then a lot of packages, that's how they specify things, so they get their data jumbled. That's in there. The other thing we've been adding, and these are actually in 12 as well, is the element type. We've put out most of the things what they call proxy objects, but some of the things you know they're a slab or something like this. You can now set that so they will go out as IFC slabs or windows. If you look at all the IFC stuff, there's nothing much in there for civil, but that's coming. So we can read and write all those things in the next version. The main thing is for civil works, I mean, I'm on the committees for these things, they are putting in alignments and tins. And we've already got those inside 12D model, so you can start sending out some real civil information. And I'll talk about that again later. So basically, we are starting to get civil data now in BIM. It's not just vertical architectural data. A thing called model tree. Alan's going to talk about this. I'll jump through these. Basically, instead of just having a model name, you can have slash and a submodel and so on. So it's a tree-like structure. So you can do it for tins, trins and functions. You don't get this by default. You need to turn it on because once you've got a model tree project, you can't go back to the other. This is interesting. It's going to take, I think, a whole version for it to really come to grips with all the things that could happen. So basically, though, it makes things a bit different. It's supported in our XML readers and writers and 12D ASCII, but you can't convert them. Because if you've got this hash in there, we can sort of get rid of it, but you might get duplicate names and things. Anyway, we'll see. You'll see how that goes, and so Alan will go through these later. Almost finished for you. The documentation. On the panel now, you can actually, inside 12 model, go things like the documentation, what's new and stuff like that. So it is there on the menu for you to get. So it's going to make it much easier to get access to all that sort of data. So it's all there in the help area on the right-hand side. There's a whole lot more there now. So you can actually get them, so you don't have to ring up and try and get them from us. And that might mean when you ask a question, we can say, go to page such and such of the documentation, and it's right there with you. So that's, as I say, the reference manual, the programming language manual, the What's New PDF, the summary HTML I've been doing, and the getting started for design, the getting started for surveying. They'll always all be shipped with 12D models, so you don't have to get them extra. Finally, because I'm a couple of minutes overdue, there's user-defined main menu. You can make up your own menu up the top. So you can have what you like up the top. I think you can call it what you like. You can have user-defined sub-menus. So you can make this thing look like whatever you want to look like. There will be a button to get back to your full 12D model 14. So we'll always be able to get back to our main menu, the way it looks and feels. From our support people, they call that the sanity button. Because you're going to ring up and ask all these questions about something on your menus that aren't on our menus. So we'll be probably saying to you, hit the sanity button and tell me where that option is. So this is going to be interesting. When you start ringing up with support calls and we have no idea what your system's like, it's going to be fun. But yeah, great stuff. And obviously, if you've got people who only need a very restricted part of 12D model, you can then make up a special user-defined menu for them system, and so that's all they have. So it may make people and training other people much, much easier. So there's about 300 or more new things in 12D Model 14. We always say the next version is going to be a catch-up version, there's nothing much in it. Well, we've sort of got a whole lot more again. But we need to. The world's changing quickly and we have to change quickly with it. So we've only looked at some of them. A lot will be demonstrated in the Birds of a Feather sessions. There'll be a whole lot in the What's New in 12D Model PDF that'll come with it. It's about 500 pages at the moment. Doesn't include any water, doesn't include any survey, just all of some of the other things. There will also be webinars. Who's gone and listened to any 12D webinars? Excellent, excellent. A great source of information, and we'll continue putting all the information up there so you can look at it at any time. Oh, I should ask, have you enjoyed the webinars? Right, good. Just because you look at them, I suppose, doesn't mean you like them. So basically, that's all from me at the moment. Thank you very much. Everyone, welcome again for being here, and look forward to getting 12D Model 14 and getting your feedback. Thanks.